I hear people say all the time, well, I know my core values, or my core value is honesty. Like, so now what? How do you make sure that the people that aren't aligned to those values are not coming into your zone? And how do you invite and attract the ones that you want?
Let's use honesty. It's not only about saying, this is a word that is my core value. The next thing that I ask leaders to do is, how is honesty defined in the dictionary? Step one. Step two is, now that you've read the dictionary definition, how do you then define honesty for yourself? What does honesty mean to you? And that means tangibly writing this down, putting it in words and putting it in your own words. And then here's the kicker. How do you apply honesty in your everyday? So for business, it's really easy, right? It's the we believe statements. This is how we do it. This is how we act. This is how we behave. And without that translation of this is how I define it, this is how I act and behave, it just becomes confetti in the wind.
The idea of job security is outdated as a landline. If you haven't been in a search for a while, it's probable you will at some point, by choice or not. Most executives admit to staying way too long or sense what's coming and justify staying anyway. Here, there's another reason. The faulty belief that navigating to what's next will inevitably be worse and has to suck. Screw that. Loren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
We're here to interrupt this love fest. I have my sister from another mister here, Ricki Pasinelli, or Pasinelli, if you really want to get specific, or just if you're like a normie, Ricki Pasinelli. And Ricki's one of those people that I met on LinkedIn, and it was like, where have you been my entire life? Like, I don't even know how we were separated at birth. Her energy is so infectious, and also she is here today to talk about something and really drive the whole idea of why core values are everything and at the core of your organization, but also for you job seekers, why this isn't a bunch of BS. So, Ricki, I could not be any more excited to bring this blast to our audience. And thank you for being here. And really would love to know, how did you get all wrangled up in these core values? Like, you're not a no bullshit person. So why would this woo-woo thing, or air quotes, so-called woo-woo thing, be something that you find to be so valuable in your work? And why do we need to know?
I love it. It's an excellent question. So thank you for asking. And frankly, right, woo-woo between quotation marks, because at the end of the day, it's the thing that fuels everything that we do. And right, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the top is self-actualization. Are we going to talk about that today? Absolutely not. But you should be very clear on who you are, what you stand for, what you believe before you walk into any room, whether that's personal or professional. So I always start there. And what I find, even in working with companies or the young adults who I mentor as they're looking for jobs or whatever situation, if you're not clear on how you're showing up in the world, nobody else is going to see that either. So from a business perspective, right, I always start with, what are your core values? It's the very first question I ask. And if they can't answer it, even in any manner, it doesn't need to be well articulated, but even in any manner, then you know that nobody else in the company is coming along. And it's the same thing when you're interviewing for a job, when you're looking for work. You should be able to answer that question seamlessly, very easily, and be very clear on how those core values translate into the work you're going to do.
So this commitment is like a big deal, because you actually said you should. And so if you should, then how do I tap into them? Because I hear people say all the time, well, I know my core values, or my core value is honesty. So great.
Right.
So now what? How do you take it from a blanket statement and then have it mean something in real life? How do you use that as a buffer filter? How do you use that practically so that you are not, I say this all the time, right? Attract and repel. How do you make sure that the people
Yeah.
that aren't aligned to those values are not coming into your zone? And how do you invite and attract the ones that you want?
Yeah, great question. I'll talk about it in terms of how I run a workshop and then how I translate it into, your question, which is on the personal level. So when we do a core values workshop, and it's a 2-day process, right? A couple of hours, 2 days in a row, because there's a lot of thinking time that needs to happen in the middle or on the in-betweens. But it's not only about, let's use honesty since you brought that up. It's not only about saying this is a word that is my core value. The next thing that I ask leaders to do is, how is honesty defined in the dictionary? Okay, step one. Step two is, now that you've read the dictionary description or definition, how do you then define honesty for yourself? What does honesty mean to you? And that means tangibly writing this down, putting it in words and putting it in your own words. And then here's the kicker. How do you apply honesty in your everyday? So for business, it's really easy, right? It's the we believe statements. This is how we do it. This is how we act. This is how we behave. And without that translation of this is how I define it, this is how I act and behave, it just becomes confetti in the wind. And you might as well, I can say honesty is my core value, but what it means to me is X, and this is how I show up every day. So if we translate that into the personal, you've got a winning dialogue that you've already created for yourself, and it's a shortcut to get to what that explanation is and what it means to you, because then you can truly own it. And again, whether it's personal or professional, you got to write it down and make it tangible, or really it just doesn't exist and it just becomes fluff.
So I just realized something.
Yes.
I want to give some more context to our audience. So what do you do? Why do you even use these things? That's my bad. So I should have included your professional credentials, because you're somebody that many, many, many brands, companies, businesses rely on to help them get straight on their values so that they're not all things to all people, and so that they have that intrinsic understanding and pull belief system for what initiatives are going to take place, who they're going to hire, how they're going to grow, et cetera, et cetera. So bring us back a little bit.
Okay, thank you. So my background is in strategy. So when I say strategy, which has a huge, right, a huge spread across a lot of different types of businesses, I mean brand strategy, growth strategy, marketing strategy, business development strategy. What are the things that are going to unlock a company so that they can reach exponential growth? Whatever you define as exponential growth, right? As a founder, as a leader of an organization. So at the very nascent level, what I do is I help those leaders get unlocked, break through the plateau, and create a growth plan that resonates with not only the leadership team, but also with everybody in the organization. So when we talk about core values, it's really just one teeny tiny, very important piece of what I do for a living. I come from the world of strategic, creative brand agencies. I ran, right, our experience design practice for many, many years at an agency that I blew up that entire career in 2019. And what I decided to do was take growth and how I did growth at the agency for my team, but also for my clients. And I converted it into something for a company that I went to work for in-house to help them grow. And the greatest story I tell, which is in my LinkedIn this week, is that I inherited a company whose core values were just exactly what you said: honesty, integrity, trustworthiness. It meant nothing to anybody. Sure, it was lip service, but those are the things that we have to align on and build on first so that there's a foundation for how we grow as an organization and how we're going to do it. So I went in-house with a company, and then I was there for about 2 years, and then decided that I needed to start my own company, work for mid-size, mid-level organizations that are like minimum 15 million in revenue, because those are the companies who have been really fortunate to grow in a certain way and can't get past that threshold. And I can help them get past it. So
So
that's what
I'm
I
so
do for a
glad that you
living.
mentioned this, because you dropped this little nugget, and it's time to bring it back out into the open. You mentioned something about plateauing, right? They get to
Yeah.
this level, like we all hit plateaus, right? We all hit plateaus. It doesn't matter if it's in your workout, doesn't matter if it's in your job search, doesn't matter if it's in your organization. So help us figure out what the overlap is between core values and breaking through those plateaus. How do those two things
Yeah.
talk to each other?
Great. So it works this way, and it works this way every time.
Every time.
I have every time. I know it's a big statement, right? But it works every time. So I usually get hired because there's a specific challenge that let's use CEO right now, that a CEO comes to me with and says, my sales team is not delivering. We need to grow the company. Can you take a look at my sales strategy? And of course I say yes, but we need to dive in and do the due diligence. I need to understand how the organization is working. I need to know what you stand for. I need to know what your brand is. I need to know what your sales team is doing. The reality is, it's typically not a sales problem. It's typically a leadership problem that I run into. And to answer your question very specifically, the organization is not moving in the same direction that the CEO is moving in, and the CEO can't understand why everybody is not following along. So where we start is, let's get everybody in the company on the same page. And I know this seems really obvious, but in reality, it's not happening in the organization typically. So we always start with, what is your vision? Where are you going in the next 5 years? What is your mission? How are you going to get there? And then, what are the core values? What are the things that live at the central part of the being of this organization? And then from there, once we get everybody aligned, and honestly, Loren, it's not that hard, because once you have it, and you'll hear me say this all the time, in writing on a sheet of paper where everyone can be talking about it, you then start to create a dynamic where everybody is rowing in the exact same direction. It's not a silver bullet, and I don't want to tell you it's a quick process, but what I will tell you is it is something that works every single time. And more importantly, it's not something that you just say once, right? And it's not something that you just put on the walls, right, that people read every day, but it's the constant repetition over and over and over and over again that makes the difference. Because once people start hearing it and talking about it and using it in conversation and making it tangible and translating it for themselves, then it becomes real. And then the company can move forward, and the CEO can realize all of their hopes and dreams.
So
that's
this is huge, right? And I'm going to also take some liberty here and apply this to those in their job search, because this is really no different. So if you are in a job search, and a lot of our listeners are 100%, and many, maybe most of them are at that C-suite level. And what I want to overlay on top of what you're saying, Ricki, is that those core values, and we'll show you where to tap into them, but important to know is that they are not just like a throwaway item or 3 things that you list that are, just a nice to have, or some kind of, thing that you put in there. These are, and how we talk about them as well, is these are your filters. So they allow you to see through. So if my core value, my number one core value is integrity. And I define that as my words and my actions need to match every single time for me to live a life that is in integrity. So if I make a commitment to do something, you could pretty much set your clock by it. Now, is it every moment of every day? No, of course. I'm a human being. And they also straddle both my personal and professional life. So my values don't like, oh, I'm on time with my clients, and then oops, I'm running 40 minutes behind with other personal things. So they need to work across every area of your existence. Otherwise, they're really not a core value, right? They're just like, they're just a platitude.
Right. Otherwise, it's just lip service. Well, I like to use throwing confetti into the wind, right?
Throwing confetti
Otherwise,
in the wind,
really
right?
Yeah.
And so,
otherwise, they just don't matter.
And so if you are networking with somebody, and let's just say repeatedly, not once, maybe not twice, they are not showing up or they didn't follow through on something, that's a decision that you need to make. Is this somebody that you want to continue to build a relationship with? Is this somebody that you really want to, include in your quote unquote inner circle or for a job search, right? They keep, I'm just going to say it, dicking you around with when they're going to get back to you, when they're going to get back to you. And at a certain point in time, you can provide some grace and leeway, but is that a bigger indication, especially if they're saying their core value is communication, and then they've been ghosting on you.
Right.
So use those things. And what I also want to ask you is, what happens when you've defined these core values and then they move into a place of, let's just call it violation, or somebody steps on those core values? What is the consequence or the repercussions of that?
Well, I can tell you that in a story that's very personal. Storytelling helps a lot. So my core values, let me start with those, are relationships, growth-mindedness, servant or support leadership. And the fourth one, which I'm trying to dial up as much as possible, is fun. So what I want to be clear about is there's nothing in there that talks about financial, money, anything related to dollars. Granted, they are important. They allow me to be on vacation like I am today, but that is not anywhere in my core values. I took a job in 2020 that was all about money. It was all about money and title. And I was super excited when I accepted the role. But 2 weeks before I started at that company, I went kicking and screaming, crying, throwing fits like a toddler. I could feel in my gut that it wasn't the right decision, but I didn't put the kibosh on it. I took the job, I made a commitment, and I was supposed to be there for 3 years to help them grow, create their brand strategy, their growth strategy, their business development strategy, and then get them ready for sale. About a year in, it suddenly dawned on me why I was sick all of the time, why I didn't feel good about the job I was doing. Granted, we were also in the middle of COVID, so keep in mind there were external influences in my life and in the company's life that were changing the dynamic of the role that I had accepted. But what I realized, and a very good friend said to me, you are not passionate about this job in any capacity. So if you're not passionate, go find things outside of this role so you can see what's starting to happen that you are passionate about, that fill you, that are in line with your core values. After 2 years, I was out. And I was out because I knew that I took that role on for all of the wrong reasons. The money was tempting. The title was super tempting. The position in the company was incredibly tempting. And I took it because I thought that's what my ego needed, right? That delicate ego shell. But the thing that actually drives me is my soul. And if I am in alignment with my soul, which is where my core values sit. So if you think about it in terms of what type of job you're looking for, what type of company you want to work for, and what fuels you and how you behave every day, then those things have to be in line, or there's a ton of cognitive dissonance every day. And I don't know why it took me a year to figure it out, but it did. And then it took me another year to actually start to get out of there and create some freedom for myself. But that became very clear that those core values that I actually dialed up to get the job, right? I listed my core values. I wrote about them. I talked to the company about how that was a benefit to them. But what I never actually considered is what the company's core values were and how they would be a benefit to me.
Mm,
And it
yes.
was complete and total misalignment. So my recommendation always is, and I tell this story as a cautionary tale, like you need to be very clear on what you stand for and how you behave, because the company that that you go to work for also has to align with that. It doesn't have to be a perfect match. We're not talking about apples to apples here, but there has to be alignment, or, you ready for me to say it? We're just throwing confetti into the wind,
Right.
right? And I think all of those things start with trust, respect, and shared purpose
Mhm.
at the very minimum. And
Mhm.
if those things don't exist and you're not clear on your core values, then you're not in the right place.
I really appreciate this story because I can completely identify with this. I did the same thing, right?
Yeah,
I
a lot of people
absolutely did
do.
the same thing. And guess what? A lot of our clients do too, because they put this on paper. And then when somebody starts waving a boatload of cash, it's like all of a sudden the values go out the window. Oh, that's nice to have. I'm just going to try this.
Right,
I'm just going to see if this works,
right,
right?
right.
And 90% of the time, it doesn't work. And what the repercussions, at least for me, were when I took that job, um, it was it was like I was in an environment that was said to be the place to build people up. And I found out that every single minute of my day was a transaction. How long I went to the bathroom, how long
Yeah,
I was when I wasn't performing, what's next, what's next, what's next. I only lasted 10 months, which is fine. But the point is that it was eating at me so much so that literally I would have to pull over on the side of the road before I get to work so I could puke out my door, because I was like, I feel dirty. I feel
yeah,
gross.
and exactly.
I feel disgusting. Like I can't peddle this stuff anymore because it's grinding on my
Yeah,
internal, I guess you could say, moral ethics and values, right? It's really eating at my kushkis. It's like
yeah.
it's really keeping me up at night. And I
Right,
can't handle that anymore because
right.
it's not the person that I want to be, and I don't feel good about it. I can make all the money in the world, but in many ways I felt like a hooker, like I was just
Yeah,
like, oh my God,
totally.
this is so duplicitous. I just don't want to be any part of it. So, that
Yeah.
was the end of that. And what I also want to kind of offer our audience is, okay, so now that we've built them up and given them all this credence, where do I go find them, and how do I make the decision between the ones that are, those are great, those are important, and the other
Right,
ones that are like, hey, no way is anybody crossing this line on my core values?
right, right. Such a good question. There's a variety of ways to do it. I'll tell you how I do it. I'll tell you how I lead the workshop in building core values, because I think it's the best way, but that's because it's my way.
It's okay. That's why you're
Um,
here.
that's why I'm here. So there's a list, right? You can pull up a list online. I have a list that I work from. It is rows and rows and rows and rows of different values, right? So you can start circling 20, narrow to 10. You want to get to 5, maybe 3. I have 4. But that is the place to start. Truly, truly start, and just start circling the words that resonate with you. That's it. The reason I say to narrow to 10 to start is because if you remember what I said before, you need to go define those, right? So go into the dictionary and define and write, physically write, whether you type or use a pen, physically write those definitions out. Do those values and the definition of them make sense to you, right? So now you can start to see how we've filled the top of the funnel. We're going to start to narrow it. All right, so these are the 8 or these are the 7 that work for me. And then I'm going to go and define those for myself. What do those 7 words mean to me? And then again, you can start to narrow the funnel even further down, right? Like, okay, these are the 5 that work for me. Now, what does that mean in my everyday? How am I going to act? How do I behave? What does that look like when I actually employ this core value? And my biggest recommendation and pro tip is ask your family, ask your friends, and ask the people who you work with or have worked with. Because what you want to do is be talking about them. Does this sound right? Does it sound believable? And in some cases,
So
I will actually
back me up.
yeah,
I want you to
yeah, yeah.
pretend that you don't have to pretend I'm a friend, but ask me, like run it by me. What would that sound like if you wanted me to spot check your core values?
Yeah. So here are my 4 core values, right? Commitment to authentic relationships, growth mindedness, support leadership, and fun. These are how I define them for me. What do you think? Does that seem right? Does it feel authentic to you of how well you know me?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of interviewing, a little bit of networking, relationship building. And I recommend that you talk to people who know you because they're going to call bullshit, right? So if I'm putting honesty on there, right, of course I'm honest. Of course I have integrity. Of course I work from a place of trust, respect, and shared purpose. But is that the core of who I am? Have I defined it in a way that makes sense to me and then makes sense to you?
Right.
So let me back up just for a second. Sometimes what I recommend people doing if they're having a hard time getting to their big list is I will say, take this list home, give it to your spouse, give it to your partner, give it to your kids, and have them circle the core values that they think match who you are so that you can start to get a collaborative list. And then you can start to define it and do the spot check. Does this really make sense to me?
Okay, so I
it's
love
not
all of this. And the reason why I also love this is because this is an awesome icebreaker to work with somebody in your networking circle with who you
totally
have like go back to a former coworker, go back to a former boss and use this and make sure that it's both ways, right? Because they're going to get something out of it. You're going to get something out of it. Like it's
right.
like core values and coffee, right? Like it's an easy way to be able to bond and also get some work done. I mean, this is really some good juju. And it's
Yeah.
honestly, it it might not look like a resume and you feel like you're like checking a box, but this is way more foundational than that, because that also, this is the other thing that is so powerful about you specifically, Ricki, is those core values, they ooze out of your being, right? Like I can feel your fun on your profile picture. I can feel your fun in the comments. I can feel your fun in real life. So all of that is consistent and translating. And I mean, that's just your 4th one, not to discredit any of the other ones. But my point is
Right.
that's the glue that I have built an expectation around when it comes to working with you, when it comes to hanging out with you,
Right.
when I see your lovely face on my comments, I'm like, woo, Ricki gave me some love because she's fun, right? And so
Yeah.
if you are thinking that they're just kind of like there for your consumption, know that other people are going to benefit from them because it also drives a level of impact and leadership that no communication can actually deliver on its own. It's kind of like your secret weapon.
It is. It's the show, don't tell, right? Show, don't tell. Really important. And you said something in there that is interesting to me, which is this is a great icebreaker. If you're nervous about doing informational interviews or going back to somebody you've worked with or has been a prospect, this is a great way to have a dynamic and lively conversation that it's really hard to say no, right?
Oh,
Looking at somebody's resume and editing it or give me some tips is a really hard thing for leaders to do from personal experience.
right.
But if somebody were to call me and say, I'm working through my core values, would you be willing to give me a half an hour of your time? Core values and coffee. Thank you. Great concept. Would you be willing to give me a half an hour of your time so that we can have a conversation? I worked for you 25 years ago, but you resonated with me. You're someone I'd love to talk to. And then what naturally comes from that is yes or no, absolutely. These core values work for you, but also how can I help you with your next step? What does that start to look like? Then it becomes an authentic conversation rather than I'm asking somebody to help with my resume again. It's less of a burden and much more of a way to support and serve and build on. And I think that's really important. I work with a lot of 20 somethings, right? Who are job seeking, who are looking, they're kind of moving to their second career move. And they really don't know how to break through. They don't know how to ask the questions. They don't know how to ask for an informational interview. And I think this is a really nice shortcut to get there.
Yeah. And I also will double click on that and say, now that those people know your core values, who else do you know that might have the same ones? Now
Totally.
you are
Right.
amplifying the time that you're there. And chances are, this is just a truism, right? Birds of a feather flock together. So when people get hired and they're referred into an organization, part of it is because if you're a rock star, chances are the people that you're hanging out with, they're also rock stars. So they're going to recruit more people. So those are really, really powerful, which is why they also move faster through the decision-making process. It's not just like they got inside, it's that they've been vetted, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. I did a post a couple weeks ago about, I quoted Daniel Intarella, right? Your vibe is your tribe.
Oh my
right?
goodness.
And that doesn't just pertain to your social life and the people who you decide to surround yourself with, but it also pertains to the type of company or the type of people who you want to work with, right? Your vibe is your tribe. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And there's so much vibing that happens on LinkedIn. It's ridiculous. So,
oh my God,
this is such a great playground. And if you are looking, you can even do a search for those values in the search bar and start really finding people who are aligned in those values. Probably come up with a lot of companies that do that too, right? Because they're posting them. So now the important thing is don't just take them at face value. Make sure that you are also doing your version of sniff testing, which I also, that's my nice way of saying like, who the blank are these people anyway, right?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I think a great interview question, Loren, is I see that your core values are X, Y, and Z. Talk to me about what that really means in the day-to-day at this company. My core values are A, B, and C. I'd love to understand where they overlap, where they align, because this is as much of a fit test for me as it is for you.
100%.
Right? There's a degree of taking control of the interview and making it your opportunity to vet them as much as they are vetting
Please
you.
God. And then, of course, how do they show up in my performance review, right?
Yeah, please. We didn't even talk about the long-term effect.
How do I really make sure that you care?
Yeah.
Because they're gonna come in. Like, are they integrated? Right? Are they for real? Do they have holding power? Ricki?
Right. How is Loren matching these core values every day in the work that she does as part of this organization? It's a critical thing, for sure.
Okay. Can we take this to a core values and coffee? Because I just absolutely, I'm always trying to get more Ricki time. And if you are not following Ricki, like, please get on the bus, because this is somebody you absolutely want to follow on LinkedIn. And for you mid-sized companies, hire her before you start getting into all kinds of snafus and start spending money that is misaligned to your audience and also your goals. So Ricki Pasinelli, or Pasinelli, you have 3 identities that are very closely aligned.
Thank you. I'll take all of them.
Accuracy is a good core value. And I just want to say, I love you from the bottom of my heart. I don't know you forever, and I don't even need to, because I vibe with you and you vibe with me. And so thank you for just being part of the wonderful world of LinkedIn and also in my personal life. So with that said, thank you, dear listeners. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to this conversation. If you enjoyed it, by all means, please make sure that you subscribe and also put an Apple Podcast review there. You have no idea, I do look at them, how much they mean to us and how it is helping us grow. We are still growing and are nearing the top 1% of all podcasts. So this is a big deal and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you, thank you, thank you for all of that.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next career blast in a half. Most of all, thank you for you.